We've all been taught to chase results. From a very young age, we're rewarded for achievements: the grade on the paper, the trophy on the shelf, the number on the scale, the salary figure, the follower count. It's ingrained in us: perform well, get results, and you win. But here's the problem. When you live your life measuring everything by the outcome, you start living only for the outcome. You become addicted to the finish line. And that's where everything begins to fall apart. See, when you obsess over results, you lose sight of the process, the journey, the learning, the small wins that actually shape you into who you're meant to be. It's the equivalent of trying to grow a tree by staring at the fruit. You don't grow the fruit, you water the roots, you nourish the soil. You pay attention to the invisible work, the boring work, the foundational work, and one day, fruit appears. But not because you chased it, because you honored the process. And that's the new rule that shifts everything. Stop chasing outcomes. Start devoting yourself to process. When people set goals, they often ask, "What do I want?" It's a valid question, but it's incomplete. The better question is, who do I want to become? Because when you focus on becoming rather than getting, you shift the direction of your entire life. Outcomes can be taken away, titles can disappear. Promotions can stall, recognition can fade, but who you become, that stays with you, that evolves and grows and multiplies with time. Let's say someone wants to be a best-selling author. They fixate on the result, hit the list, get the sales, land the interviews. And because they're focused on that, they might write what's trendy rather than what's true. They might rush through the writing process. They might measure their value by how many copies they sell rather than how much they grow. Now compare that to someone who says, "I want to become the kind of person who writes every day. I want to become someone who tells stories that matter, no matter how many people read them." One is driven by outcome. The other is driven by process. Guess who lasts longer? Guess who creates deeper impact? This applies everywhere: in business, in leadership, in relationships. The most inspiring leaders don't walk into a room trying to prove they're right or get immediate wins. They show up every day asking, "How can I lead better today than I did yesterday? How can I create conditions where others thrive?" That's process-driven thinking. It's not glamorous, it's not always visible. But it's powerful, and it compounds over time. The world is full of people who start strong and disappear. They get excited about the end result, but the moment it gets hard, the moment the finish line seems too far away, they quit. Why? Because they never fell in love with the process. They were only in love with the idea of what the outcome could give them. Think about athletes. The ones who make it to the top don't just train when it's convenient. They don't just work when the lights are on. They put in hours no one sees. They build habits no one applauds. They show up even when they don't feel like it. That's devotion to process, and it's what separates professionals from dabblers. It's what separates purpose from performance. In our culture, we love the highlight reel. We love the overnight success. But most of what looks like a big win was built on quiet discipline. Every great invention, every meaningful movement, every deep relationship, they were shaped by daily choices. And that's why this new rule matters so much. When you let go of the obsession with what you can get, you open yourself to the power of what you can give. You give your time, you give your attention, you give your effort to something that may not reward you right away but will shape you in ways that last forever. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't have goals. Goals are important, they give us direction, but don't make them your identity. Your identity should be rooted in your values, your habits, your integrity. That's what's sustainable. That's what creates fulfillment. And ironically, when you devote yourself to the process with consistency, curiosity, and patience, the outcomes tend to take care of themselves. Success becomes a byproduct, not a fixation. There's a quiet confidence that comes from doing the work even when no one is watching. There's a strength in saying, "I'm not there yet, but I'm committed to showing up." That's the kind of mindset that builds resilience. That's the kind of mindset that doesn't break when things don't go as planned. Because when you're process-driven, failure isn't a sign that you're not good enough, it's just feedback. It's just data. It's a chance to grow. If you lead a team, teach this. If you raise children, model this. If you're chasing a dream, remember this. Fall in love with becoming. Make the process your playground. Make every step meaningful, even if it's messy. Because in the end, it's not the person who had the biggest vision that wins, it's the person who honored the process long enough to become the kind of person who could carry that vision. So next time you find yourself asking, how do I get there? Stop. Ask instead, what habits am I building today? Because there is only meaningful if you become someone worth being along the way. That's the shift. That's the rule. And that more than any goal or finish line is what actually changes everything. We live in a world obsessed with the what. What do you do? What do you sell? What's your title? What's your product? What's the result? It's the first thing people ask in a conversation. It's the first thing companies push in their marketing. But the truth is, the what is surface level. It's easy to imitate. It's easy to commoditize. Everyone has a what. The real question, the question that separates the forgettable from the unforgettable, is why. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. That's not just a catchy phrase. It's a principle rooted in human behavior. When people connect to your purpose, they stick, they trust, they advocate, because it's not just a product they're buying. It's not just a service they're hiring, it's a belief they're aligning with, it's a cause they're joining, it's meaning. But here's the problem, most people and most organizations can tell you what they do. Fewer can tell you how they do it differently, and almost none can clearly articulate why they do it. And yet, the why is the very thing that creates loyalty. It's the why that sparks emotion. It's the why that creates a story people want to be part of. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are it's not just what they accomplished that moves you, it's why they did it. Maybe it's the leader who stood for something bigger than a paycheck. Maybe it's the teacher who believed in kids when no one else would. Maybe it's the entrepreneur who didn't just want to make money, but wanted to challenge the status quo. That's the power of why. It inspires. In the workplace, we see this disconnect all the time. Companies tell their employees what to do and how to do it. But when people don't know why their work matters, they disengage, they go through the motions, they do just enough to get by. But when people are connected to purpose, when they see how their role contributes to something meaningful, they light up. They go the extra mile, they care. Purpose isn't reserved for non-profits or idealists. Every organization can have a why. Every person can have a mission. The challenge is taking the time to define it. To go beyond the surface, to ask the deeper questions. Why do we exist? Why does this work matter? Why do I get out of bed every morning to do this? And yes, this applies to individuals just as much as organizations. Too many people build careers around what they're good at without ever asking what they're meant for. They chase promotions, titles, and recognition, but somewhere along the way, they lose themselves. They get burned out, not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing the wrong things. Things disconnected from who they are and why they're here. When you start with why, everything changes. Decision-making becomes clearer, communication becomes more compelling, leadership becomes more human, because now instead of pushing tasks or demands, you're inviting people into a vision. You're giving them something to believe in, not just something to do. And here's something most people don't realize. Your why doesn't have to be unique, it just has to be true. It's not about crafting the perfect mission statement or saying something poetic. It's about being honest. What breaks your heart? What lights you up? What kind of world are you trying to create? Start there. That's your center. And when you lead from that center, when you let your why guide your what, you build trust. Because people can sense when someone is genuine. They can tell when you're acting out of alignment. They can feel when your words don't match your intentions. But when you're rooted in why, your words and actions reinforce each other. And that's what makes people follow you even when the road is hard. Think about the great movements in history. They didn't start with a detailed business plan. They started with a belief, a why, a clear conviction that things could be better and that people could be the ones to make it so. That's what pulls others in, that's what sustains momentum, and that's how legacies are built. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore the what matters. The what is how we bring our why to life, but it's not the starting point. It's the result, it's the fruit of a deeper root, and when you reverse the order, when you start with what and forget the why, you risk becoming just another voice in the noise, just another product in the sea of sameness. So how do you find your why? You look inward, you reflect on your past, the moments that moved you, challenged you, shaped you. You look outward at the people you admire, the causes that matter to you, the impact you want to have. And you look forward asking yourself not just what kind of work you want to do, but what kind of person you want to be remembered as. You don't find your why in a job title, you don't find it in a paycheck. You find it in moments, in values, in service. You find it when you're willing to ask again and again, is what I'm doing aligned with what I believe? Because at the end of the day, people will forget the details of what you said. They might forget the specific tasks you performed, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And when your why is clear, the way you lead, speak, and act will naturally make people feel something. That's what changes lives. That's what builds loyalty. That's what makes a difference. The new rule is simple. Stop leading with what? Stop starting conversations with facts and features and functions. Start with belief. Start with conviction. Start with why. Because when you do, you won't just lead better, you'll lead in a way that lasts. One of the most common responses we give when something goes wrong is to look outward. Who caused this? Who dropped the ball? Who's responsible for this mess? It's an instinct, almost automatic. We point the finger, we assign blame, we relieve ourselves of the burden by transferring it to someone else. But the moment we do that, we also surrender something far more valuable, our power to change, to lead, to grow. Blame feels good in the short term. It protects our ego. It makes us feel right, but it also keeps us stuck. Because the second you decide that someone else is the reason for your failure, frustration, or stagnation, you've given them control of your future. And if they're the problem, then you're just a victim of circumstance. That's the cost of blame. It robs you of agency. There's a better way, a harder way, but a better one, and it starts with this rule: default to responsibility, not blame, not finger pointing, not excuses. Responsibility. Responsibility says, maybe this isn't entirely my fault, but it is entirely within my power to respond. It says, I can learn from this, I can own my role in this, I can do better next time. It invites growth instead of defensiveness. It opens the door to progress rather than shutting it with shame. Think about the leaders you admire most. Chances are they didn't build trust by being perfect. They built it by owning their mistakes. They created safe spaces where people didn't have to fear failure because the tone was set at the top. We're in this together. We don't throw each other under the bus. We own it. We learn. We move forward. That's what responsibility looks like, and it's rare, because most environments reward blame. When something breaks, the instinct is to identify the scapegoat. Who messed up? Who do we punish? But in great cultures, the question isn't who can we blame. It's what can we learn? Responsibility is different from guilt. It's not about beating yourself up or absorbing all the fault. It's about being grounded enough to say, I may not have caused this entirely, but I'm part of it now, and how I respond defines who I am. That's the difference between reactive leadership and responsible leadership. A reactive leader blames the market, the employees, the competitors. A responsible leader looks inward and asks, what could I have done differently? What will I do next time? The first kind of leadership deflects. The second transforms, and this doesn't only apply in leadership. It applies to relationships too. In every conflict, we have a choice: prove a point or improve the connection. Blame chooses the first. Responsibility chooses the second. Blame says, you always do this. Responsibility says, here's how I experienced that. Blame escalates. Responsibility invites understanding. What we often forget is that responsibility is a form of freedom. Because once you decide to own your part in your career, in your health, in your relationships, you're no longer waiting for someone else to fix it. You're not stuck hoping others change, you're changing. You're adapting. You're taking initiative, and that's what growth looks like. It's easy to blame the job you hate, the partner who disappointed you, the boss who doesn't understand. It's harder to ask, what have I tolerated too long? What conversations haven't I had? What decisions have I delayed? But that's where real power begins, in the questions we ask ourselves when no one's watching. In moments of stress or failure, our brains want to protect us. Blame becomes a shield, but growth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means saying, maybe I played a part in this, maybe I missed something, maybe I need to change, and that's not weakness. That's courage, that's emotional maturity, that's leadership. One of the most powerful things a person can do is walk into a room after something has gone wrong and say, "That's on me. I missed it. I didn't prepare us well. I'll fix it." That statement changes the energy of the room. It shifts people from fear to focus, from defense to direction, because it models what true accountability looks like, and it gives everyone else permission to do the same. Blame isolates, responsibility connects. When leaders own the culture, teams feel safe. When teammates own their part, trust builds. When individuals own their growth, the whole organization gets stronger. The question is, what are you willing to take responsibility for today? Maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a pattern you keep repeating. Maybe it's the way you react under pressure. Maybe it's the story you've been telling yourself that it's someone else's job to fix things. But what if it's yours? What if the moment you start taking full responsibility for your life, your leadership, your relationships, you begin to change everything around you? Not because you control everything, but because you've changed the one thing you do control, your response. That's what responsibility really is. It's your ability to respond with intention, with awareness, with humility, with courage, and the irony is, when you own what went wrong, you become the kind of person others trust to make things right. You build a reputation not for being perfect, but for being reliable, for being grounded, for being someone who doesn't run from hard truths but stands in them, learns from them, and leads forward. We all get to choose what kind of leader we want to be. The leader who blames circumstances, or the one who takes ownership. The leader who deflects, or the one who reflects. The leader who passes the buck, or the one who says, "It starts with me." Everyday life gives us opportunities to make that choice. When we're late to a meeting, when a project fails, when a customer is unhappy, when a teammate makes a mistake, in those moments you can blame or you can build trust. The new rule is simple. Don't look for who's at fault. Look for where you can take responsibility, because that's where growth begins, that's where leadership lives, that's the choice that shifts everything. For so long, leadership was defined by authority. The person at the top made the decisions, they gave the orders, and everyone else followed. That's how most of us were taught. Control the outcome, control the people, control the process. Control became the standard. And it worked for a time, but something shifted, the world changed, people changed, and control, while efficient in the short term, started to break things in the long run, because people aren't machines. You can't program them, you can't manage them like spreadsheets, you can't motivate them with fear forever. Eventually they break down, or worse, they stay, but they shut down, they do the bare minimum. They stop caring, they stop contributing with their hearts, and that's the cost of control. It doesn't inspire, it restrains. What inspires people isn't control, it's connection. It's feeling seen, heard, valued. It's the sense that they matter not just for what they do, but for who they are. And that's the shift we need to make if we want to lead in today's world. The shift from control to connection, from managing behavior to nurturing potential. From issuing commands to building trust. Control is about compliance, connection is about commitment, and those two things might look the same from the outside, but they're radically different underneath. A team that's merely compliant will do what they're told, nothing more, nothing less. A team that's committed will go above and beyond, not because they have to, but because they want to, because they believe, because they care. That's the kind of team that wins over time. Leaders who lead through control often get fast results, but they burn bridges along the way. They create environments where people are afraid to take risks, to speak up, to be vulnerable. And when people don't feel safe, they retreat, innovation slows, morale drops, turnover rises. Control might feel powerful, but it's actually fragile. It's built on fear, and fear is a terrible foundation for trust. On the other hand, connection creates resilience, it creates belonging, it creates a space where people feel safe to show up fully, flaws and all, and when people feel safe, they take ownership, they take initiative. They give their best, not because they're being watched, but because they feel invested in the outcome, because they feel trusted. Connection isn't soft, it's strong. It takes courage to lead with empathy. To ask real questions and actually listen to the answers, to admit you don't have all the answers, to sit with discomfort instead of shutting it down. Control says, do what I say. Connection says, let's do this together. We've all had someone in our life who led through control. Maybe it was a manager who micromanaged every step. Maybe it was a teacher who demanded performance without ever asking how you were. Maybe it was a parent who loved you, but only knew how to express it through rules and expectations. Those experiences stay with us, but so do the ones where we felt seen, the coach who believed in us, the mentor who listened without judgment, the leader who stood by us even when we messed up. Those are the people we remember. Because they made us feel like we mattered. That's the power of connection. And yet in high pressure environments, it's easy to slip back into control. Deadlines, metrics, expectations, they create tension. And when leaders feel that tension, many default to control as a way to relieve it. But the irony is, the more you try to control people, the less control you actually have. Because control doesn't breed loyalty, it breeds compliance. And people don't stay loyal to control, they stay loyal to connection. This doesn't mean letting go of accountability. It doesn't mean anything goes. In fact, real connection allows for deeper accountability. Because when people feel connected, they're more open to feedback, they're more willing to own mistakes, they're more likely to grow. Control demands results. Connection develops people. To lead with connection means making space. Space for dialogue, space for trust to grow, space for people to be human. It means asking, how are you doing? And actually caring about the answer. It means recognizing that the quietest person in the room might have the most valuable insight if they feel safe enough to speak. It means understanding that performance isn't just about skill, it's about mindset, well-being, purpose. Connection takes time, but it saves time in the long run, because when trust is high, things move faster. Conversations are more honest, misunderstandings are fewer, teams self-correct. They don't need to be managed at every turn, they manage themselves because they're connected to each other and to the mission. We lead people, not processes. We inspire humans, not job descriptions. And humans are wired for connection. It's in our DNA. We want to be part of something. We want to feel seen. We want to feel like what we do matters. Control might produce short-term performance, but connection builds long-term commitment. The new rule is this: stop trying to control outcomes through pressure. Start building outcomes through trust. Stop trying to manage behavior through fear. Start leading behavior through belief. Let your people know they're more than just numbers on a dashboard. Let them know they belong. Great leaders aren't remembered for how tightly they held the reins. They're remembered for how deeply they connected, for the people they lifted, for the trust they built, for the space they created where others could thrive. That's the kind of leadership we need now more than ever. And it doesn't come from control, it comes from connection. Too many people are playing to win a game that doesn't end. They measure success in quarters, rankings, promotions, follower counts, trophies. And when they hit those goals, they celebrate for a moment. Then the goalposts move. They want more, bigger, faster, louder. But here's the truth no one likes to talk about. The finish line you're chasing doesn't exist. Because life, leadership, relationships, these are infinite games. And the moment you start playing them with a finite mindset, you start losing in ways that truly matter. We are conditioned to think in terms of winning. We're taught to ask, who's the best? Who's ahead? How do I beat the competition? But in an infinite game, there is no best. There's only better. There is no finish line. There's only progress. The goal isn't to beat someone else, it's to become someone better. And when you understand that, everything shifts. Finite players play to win. Infinite players play to keep playing. Think about that. The finite player wants to dominate the room. The infinite player wants to make sure the room still exists tomorrow. The finite player sacrifices the long-term for short-term gain. The infinite player sacrifices ego for long-term impact. And the difference between the two isn't strategy, it's mindset. In business, we often obsess over quarterly earnings. We push for numbers. We reward short-term growth, even if it comes at the expense of culture, values, or people. But the companies that endure aren't the ones chasing every trend or squeezing every cent. They're the ones with a just cause, something bigger than profit, something worth sacrificing for. They build with the long game in mind. They invest in people, trust, culture, because they know that those things compound over time. It's the same in our personal lives. People jump from one achievement to the next, hoping the next goal will finally make them feel fulfilled. But if you're always playing for the next win, you never learn to live in the game itself. You become addicted to arrival, and arrival is always temporary. The infinite mindset isn't about arriving, it's about becoming. It's about committing to the journey, even when there's no trophy at the end. When you play the infinite game, you stop comparing your chapter to someone else's. You stop measuring your worth by external applause. You realize that success is not a destination, it's a direction. It's not about being better than others, it's about being better than who you were yesterday, and this mindset doesn't mean you don't set goals. Goals are important, but in an infinite game, goals are milestones, not in points. They help guide your progress, but they don't define your worth. Because even when you reach a goal, the game continues. The mission evolves, you evolve, and if you're only motivated by the goal, you'll burn out. But if you're motivated by the cause, you'll endure. Think about the great leaders, the ones we admire long after they're gone. They weren't just chasing metrics. They were playing for legacy. They were building something that would outlast them. They were driven by something that couldn't be measured by spreadsheets. They understood that the real impact of leadership is never fully seen, it's felt. It echoes long after the leader has left the room. That's what it means to play the infinite game. It's asking, what am I building that will matter 10 years from now? It's making decisions that may not give you credit today, but will create value tomorrow. It's choosing integrity over popularity, people over profits, legacy over likes. The infinite mindset requires patience, it requires faith, because you might plant seeds you'll never see bloom, but you plant them anyway. Because that's what builders do, that's what leaders do. They create conditions for others to thrive, even when they won't get the credit. And here's the hard part, not everyone will understand this. Some people will look at your long-term thinking and call you naive. Some will chase the quick wins and they might get ahead, at least for now, but trust this, speed is not the same as direction, noise is not the same as impact, and applause is not the same as meaning. You don't need to be the fastest, you need to be the most grounded. You don't need to win every sprint. You need to stay in the race. You need to build a life, a team, a mission that can weather storms. Not because you avoided hardship, but because you rooted yourself in purpose. The infinite player doesn't panic in hard times. They pause, they reflect, they adjust, because they know setbacks are not the end, they are part of the process. They understand that sometimes the most meaningful progress is invisible. It's the trust that was built, the character that was shaped, the resilience that was formed. When you adopt the infinite mindset, you stop chasing validation and start focusing on contribution. You stop asking, how can I win, and start asking, how can I serve? You stop fearing change and start embracing evolution, because that's what life is. It's a constant becoming, and perhaps most importantly, the infinite mindset reminds us that this is not a solo game. You cannot play the infinite game alone. You need allies. You need people who believe in the mission. You need people who are in it not for the prize, but for the purpose. And your job as a leader is to attract those people. Not with pressure, not with perks, but with purpose. So, ask yourself, what game are you playing? Are you playing to win the next round? Or are you playing to stay in the game for decades to come? Are you trying to impress people who won't remember your name? Or are you trying to impact people who will carry your values forward? There's nothing wrong with ambition, but make sure your ambition is pointed towards something infinite, something meaningful, something that makes people better, not just richer or more efficient, but better. More human, more connected, more inspired. The infinite game is slower, it's messier, it's less predictable, but it's also deeper, it's more fulfilling, it's more human, and in the end, it's the only game worth playing.